the Envisiontech podcast. I'm your host, Paul Gagan, and this week we're going to be talking about audio description. As I mentioned, this episode is going to be about audio description. So, if you don't know what audio description is, essentially it is a description of something visual. So that might be a movie, or even I've seen it, heard it done for other things, like sculptures, for example, and they'll have like an audio description of what the sculpture is. So basically what it does is it lets people who can't see understand something visual, right? So it's very important for people who can't see. So we're going to be talking about audio description in this episode. I'm going to show you a little demo here now in a second as to what audio description actually is and what difference it can make. We're going to be talking about exactly what audio description is, the different types of audio description, what are the benefits. We're going to be talking about the future of audio description. There's quite a few things actually to talk about when it comes to audio description. So without further ado, let's get started here. I'm going to be playing some clips from I believe it's a movie called Color of Paradise. If you haven't heard of the movie, honestly, that's even better. If you've seen the movie, that's totally fine. But how this is going to work is I'm going to play a clip from the movie without audio description. And then we're going to talk about what might be going on in that clip. Then I'm going to play the same clip from the movie, but with audio description. And then we're going to talk about the difference in the two clips and kind of the different information that you can gain with and without audio description. So that right there was the clip without audio description. And, I mean, as you can probably tell, it's a little bit hard to say what might be happening. Obviously, there are birds. We know that for sure. We can maybe hear some leaves. We hear some other kind of animal noises, which I assume are also birds. But that's really all the information that you can get from that clip if you just have the audio, which is what somebody who's blind would have. So keep that in mind here as I play this next clip, which will actually have audio description.
Muhammad kneels and taps his hands through the thick ground cover of brown, curled leaves. A scrawny nestling struggles on the ground near Muhammad's hand. His palm hovers above the baby bird. He lays his hand lightly over the tiny creature.
Now, I hope that gives you an understanding as to the difference the audio description can make, because as you can hear from that second clip, we actually hear about somebody called Muhammad and his sort of interaction with the bird. And that is a very small clip. I will provide the link to the website where I actually found this. It's the Audio Description Project, which is actually fantastic. And they have a lot of examples of different types of audio description on there as well. Like different things being audio described, actually. So if you're interested, definitely go take a look at that, or if you want to hear more of that clip. I believe it's over 2 minutes long, so feel free to go and listen to that. Obviously, if you actually want to hear it on something that you may actually watch, on pretty much every streaming service now, it will tell you if the show has audio description. So on Netflix, it says it before you even click on the show, for example. I believe Disney Plus does that too. Not all of them do. But usually how you will actually change it is you will go to the same place that you would go to change the language. And in there it will have, for example, English audio description or something similar to that. So if you're interested, definitely take a listen to one of those. And that is it for our little sort of demo section, and I hope that really, I said, kind of showed you the importance of audio description in media. So I just want to talk a little bit more about what audio description actually is. So it's essentially a service that will describe visual elements of media. For example, actions, settings, character expressions. It could be even the type of clothes that they're wearing or whatever it might be. And that usually will take place during a natural pause in the movie. So when the characters aren't necessarily talking, it will interject and say something. Sometimes some audio descriptions do talk over the characters that are in the show or movie or whatever it is you're watching, which is usually just annoying. So that's usually the sign of a bad sort of audio description. But it essentially allows people who are visually impaired to enjoy like any kind of content really a lot more. Obviously, it could be anything from movies to even live theater. Even if you go to the cinema now, some cinemas and for certain movies will now have audio description, which is very cool. There are two main, I don't want to call them types, but essentially of audio description that you could experience. Number one is live audio description. So that's offered during things like live theater, performances, sports events, maybe even museum tours, where the audio description is describing things in real time. So if you watch a live show on TV, whether it's like football game or whatever it might be, if that has audio description, that is quite likely being done by somebody in real time. And that does pose some problems, obviously, because, I mean, they might get it wrong and they can't go back and edit it. But it is very cool, actually, that it is actually available now. So you can enjoy even live content now, which is great, because previously that just wasn't possible at all. Obviously, then, the other one is pre-recorded audio description. So that will be directly integrated into movies, shows, I mean, really any kind of pre-recorded media, no matter what it is. You can now sort of watch those with audio description. So those are the two main kind of types. You have the live one where it's somebody sitting there describing it to you in the moment, and then the pre-recorded one where somebody will sit down and write a script and somebody reads it, and they go ahead and they edit it, they re-record stuff, etc., etc., etc. So those are kind of the two main types that you would mainly encounter. So we'll talk a little bit more about some of the more technical aspects of audio description. So as I mentioned, when you're actually creating an audio description, at least a pre-recorded one, you would need to obviously write a script. So somebody would need to watch the show, right, or read the actual script for the show. And then based on that, they would write their own audio description script. Because you have to remember, the audio description itself is technically a separate piece of media that needs to be created. You can't just sit down and record an audio description, because there might be certain elements that you might not mention. So let's say, for example, a character is wearing a certain jacket, and then later on in the episode, that's actually relevant. Well, you need to have watched the whole episode or the whole season or whatever it might be, or have kind of that inside information to then be able to tell somebody about that. You need to be able to say, oh, this character is wearing a black jacket with zip pockets, and then later on in the episode you can refer back to that in the audio description. So it's really important to obviously write a script that actually doesn't just tell the viewer about what's going on, but what is actually relevant. And that's the thing. An audio description doesn't need to tell me about every single detail on the screen. It just needs to tell me about the information that I need to watch the show. I probably don't care about the type of flowers that are visible through the window outside in the garden, if people are doing something more important in the room, So even script writing can be, a big part of the audio description process. Then obviously you need to record it. And this is changing a little bit, and we'll talk more about this later, but actually you'll hear a lot of AI voices now in audio description. And it is becoming more common as time goes on, I feel like, but you still hear a lot of actual voice actors in audio description now. So obviously you need to pay somebody to go sit down, read through this script, record it, edit it, as I said, re-record any bits that might be wrong, etc., etc. Basically, any normal recording session that you might kind of do with somebody. And again, another huge step, and that could take a very long time, especially if the movie itself is quite long, or obviously if you are recording audio description, let's say for a show like Friends, which has 10 seasons, and Friends does have audio description now, but when it was originally created, it was not created with audio description as far as I'm aware. I don't I can pretty much guarantee that. So somebody had to go through each and every single episode of Friends, write a script for every single one of those episodes, made sure that it all made sense, that it told you about all the information that you would need for everything later on in the show. Then somebody had to sit down with, probably a producer and whoever else and go through and record a audio description track for each and every single episode that has a script. And now keep in mind, this is just in one language. Because sometimes obviously you'll have audio description in English, sometimes it'll be in Spanish, Italian, whatever. But those all need to be recorded separately, and they would need to have separate scripts, obviously, as well. So it can be quite a complex task to get all of that done. Obviously, it still happens, and that's fantastic. But it's not just sitting down and describing a show to somebody. Obviously, then you need to integrate the descriptions into the media. There is nothing worse than watching a show where the audio description and the show aren't lined up correctly, and it will actually spoil what's going to happen in the show. So many times has that happened. Now, admittedly, a lot of things it's lined up really perfectly, but let's say you're watching a movie and it's supposed to be, surprising that somebody gets shot, right? Well, the audio description, 5 seconds before it happens, will say, Darren gets shot in the head. And I'm like, sorry, what? And then a couple seconds later, it actually happens, So obviously, it can be a little bit off-putting if it's not done correctly. So again, a really important step, and making sure that it lines up with the whole episode. Because sometimes it'll start out great, and then as the episode goes on, it is actually less well aligned. Now, keep in mind, all these things might include collaboration with people from the actual media itself that was created, because you might have questions for them, they might have information for you. You might need to talk to accessibility experts, obviously audio professionals, any industry professional, like let's say, for example, a character is doing something on a computer, and you aren't very technical, but you're writing the script. You're going to need to talk to somebody who has the knowledge necessary to describe what's going on there. So it's also not necessarily just a one-person job to write a script. You might need people to sort of consult and help you sort of describe things in an accurate way. Now, audio description is meant to sort of enhance the visualization for somebody who's trying to, watch, if you will, the media. So for me anyway, when I'm listening to something with audio description, in my head, I'm actually creating a mental image of what's happening. So I might be visualizing a room with people in it. Maybe it has a certain sofa that's a certain color, right? And people are sitting on the sofa and they have certain expressions on their faces, etc. So it really helps you kind of get a better understanding of the story and the context. So, somebody is saying one thing, but their facial expressions are actually, looking angry, or maybe they're sitting relaxed on a chair, or whatever it might be. So it's really important to kind of have that extra context, because it can actually change what is going on in the show. Obviously, having that descriptive sort of narration can provide a bit of context for complex scenes. For example, if I'm watching an action movie, right, let's say something like Mission Impossible, there are a lot of scenes in that I wouldn't really understand what's going on, because all there is noises. And maybe somebody's climbing something, and I might be able to figure that out, but what are they climbing? What is happening there? Are they in danger? Are they going to fall? What's going on? Why are they climbing it? Etc. So there are sort of a lot of things like that where audio description will provide a lot more information, and it doesn't even have to tell me everything, like I said. It just needs to tell me, the character is climbing a ladder, that's it. There's nothing else there. Or maybe they're trying to climb the side of a building to chase somebody. Or maybe they're being chased, and they're trying to climb down the side of a building. Whatever. Who knows? But again, really important, the context there. Because if I can hear somebody climbing, that's great. But what is that extra information? Because that actually dramatically changes what's going on. Now, some descriptions should be detailed, um, because they might include actually important details. Um, for example, the physical appearance of a character. So usually for a main character, they will tell you about them. They'll tell you maybe sort of like whether they're tall, their hair color, the style of clothes that they wear, things like that. It really ranges. Some are very specific, some are less specific. Um, so even things like that obviously will be a bit more detailed because those are characters that you will see in every episode. If it's just a side character, you might not get as much of a detailed description. Um, but it could be relevant. For example, let's say a character is blonde and people are constantly making jokes about people who are blonde. Obviously, if you don't know that, well, those jokes, I mean, they might still kind of make sense, and you might be able to reason that maybe the character has blonde hair. But obviously, if the audio description tells you from the start, things are going to make a lot more sense. And there's no chance that you will, kind of not pick up on that information. Another really important aspect of audio description that maybe you won't consider if you don't necessarily need it is that it can provide sort of a stress-free viewing experience. So, honestly, it can really reduce your anxiety. So if you're blind and you're trying to, watch a show that doesn't have audio description, you're usually worried about missing out on critical visual information. So honestly, knowing that the audio description is there, I can then sort of watch the show stress free because I'm not worried about missing information. I'm not worried about, oh, what is that character doing? Is it relevant? Does it mean anything? What actually is that noise? Like the clip we watched earlier. All I could hear was birds, maybe some leaves, but I have no idea what's actually going on. But it turns out a character is actually interacting with one of the baby birds. So again, it just reduces sort of stress and anxiety. So you can actually enjoy what you're trying to watch. Obviously, you can actually watch the show with confidence and you can actually understand what's going on. So you, as I said, can rely on the audio description to sort of let you know about anything that you need to know. Obviously, a lot of people talk about shows. So, for example, when Game of Thrones came out, a lot of people were talking about it and they would have conversations about it. And you see this with shows all the time, whether it's Riverdale or whatever, people watch a show and they will talk about it. And if you don't know what's going on in the show, you're not going to be able to engage in those conversations. And that right there is just more social isolation, which people with disabilities already experience at a higher rate anyway. So being able to have audio description, especially on popular shows or genres, means that you can actually engage in more social situations. Even if you're watching with sighted friends or family. So for example, my wife, she can see, right? And we watch a lot of shows together. We don't watch any shows separately, actually. Every show that she watches, I watch, and vice versa. So we thankfully are interested in the same things pretty much, so it works out fine. But when we watch a show without audio description, she can be a bit stressed sometimes trying to describe things to me. Because not only does she have to watch the show and understand what's going on herself, she then has to think about how to describe it to me, which honestly is understandable as to why that would kind of take away from, I don't want to say her enjoyment of the show, but why it might be a bit stressful because she's worried about missing out on information because she doesn't get to sit down, watch the whole show, write a script, and then read it to me. It's like that live audio description that I talked about earlier. So even things like that, she can actually relax and enjoy the show, and I can relax and enjoy the show. So it's just better for the both of us. So much so, actually, that she says sometimes she doesn't even realize it's on, which she actually likes it, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. But yeah, it really does help. Obviously, as I mentioned, people can participate in conversations about the show then, which is absolutely fantastic. Even me and my wife will constantly be talking about what happened in a show or oh, like, do you remember when this happened or whatever? And that wouldn't really be as possible without audio description. Obviously, if you are a content creator and you offer audio description, it's more likely that you will have more people who will watch your show or your video or whatever it might be if you have audio description available. I mean, it's obvious. If I can enjoy whatever it is that you are creating, then I'm more likely going to watch it. When we're on Netflix, for example, we are more likely to watch a movie or a show with audio description than without. It is relatively unlikely that we will watch something without audio description nowadays, especially because more and more things have it now. So you have more options. So why would I pick one without audio description when I can watch one with it? Now, there are exceptions to that. Obviously, if it's a very famous show or movie that we want to watch, or it sounds really interesting, we think it might be okay without audio description, because some shows are. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't have it. It just means that I can probably have a better chance of understanding what's going on without it. Obviously, I'm also more likely to continue watching a show if it has audio description. Let's say I start watching a show, I actually really like the show, but it's really hard for me to understand without audio description. Well, I might not keep watching it. Even though I really like the show, I might not keep watching it. And we might actually go and watch something else that has audio description instead. Because I said it's less stressful, I understand what's going on better, we can all enjoy it more. And even in terms of platforms, I keep mentioning Netflix because Netflix, when I think of audio description, Netflix is the one that comes to mind. Disney Plus, Paramount, Hulu, Peacock, all these different sort of big streaming services do have it. Even Prime Video, if you have Amazon Prime, you get Prime Video. They all do have audio description, but some of them don't do as good of a job. For example, they might not tell you if a show or movie has audio description until you actually play it and go look at the list of audio tracks. Some of them have more content with and without audio description. So, for example, we will go and find a movie on Netflix, and oh wow, it doesn't have audio description. But then we'll go look at it on Prime Video, and oh wow, it does have audio description on here. And that's another thing that the audio description project is good for, actually. A lot of the time, it isn't always accurate, and it doesn't have every single movie or show on there as far as I'm aware, but it will be able to tell you if a movie does or doesn't have audio description, and if it does, where it's available. So they'll say, okay, well, actually, let's just say Ghostbusters, right? That is available on HBO Max with audio description. So I might say, okay, let's not watch that on Netflix. Let's watch that on HBO. So again, if your platform supports more audio description, titles with audio description, then it's more likely that I will use that platform and continue to obviously pay for that platform. Obviously, there are other benefits to audio description. It just helps normalizing disabilities in media. So obviously, if audio description is included in a movie, people feel more represented. You feel like you're actually a part of a valued audience, not just somebody that nobody cares about. Especially if it's a big mainstream movie, it's like, wow, okay, they actually didn't just forget about me and say whatever, you don't get to watch the movie. They specifically took time and spent money on adding this so that I can actually enjoy this piece of media. Obviously, people who can see actually might be more likely to then understand sort of some of the problems that maybe somebody who's blind would face. So it helps kind of promote empathy, whether it be the people who are actually involved with the movie, who are like, oh wow, actually, audio description exists, whatever. Or actually, if you see somebody wearing headphones in the cinema and you're like, oh wow, what are they doing? And they're listening to audio description. Or you're on Netflix and you look at the list of languages and it's like, oh, English stereo 5.1, English audio description. You'll be like, oh, what's that? Oh, that's for people who can't see. So again, it just helps promote understanding as well, which is always good. Now, there are a few, I suppose, challenges with implementing audio description. Number one is lack of awareness. A lot of people, including actual content creators, aren't aware of the existence of audio description. So, well, and even if they are aware of the existence, they might not be aware of the importance of it. So they might not choose to add it in, especially if it costs them extra money, and obviously extra time. So that is a little bit, well, a big part of the problem is people just aren't aware of it, and if they are, they're not aware of how important it is. Obviously, resource limitations, I said it costs extra money. So if it's a smaller studio or maybe even an indie filmmaker, they might not have the resources to be able to create an audio description track at all. And if they do, it might not be as high quality. A lot of times you'll see, funding provided by, and then it's like the Warner Media Group, whatever. It's technically separate to the people who made the movie. The funding to make the audio description was actually provided by, Warner Brothers, like a smaller entity inside of Warner Brothers, or whatever it might be. Obviously, it's not just Warner Brothers who do it. That's just an example. But yeah, so obviously, if you're an indie filmmaker, you might not have the ability to say, hey, we need money to create an audio description track, and they'll just give you the money. So obviously, that can be a huge challenge. Obviously, varying standards. There's inconsistency in the quality of audio descriptions across, number one, different companies. There are multiple companies that create audio descriptions. There's one called AudioEyes, there's Vitec, there's loads of them. I don't honestly know the full list, but there are a lot of different companies. Obviously, the different platforms as well will have different audio description tracks. Even different writers may write the scripts a little bit differently. Different people who read them a little bit differently. Some people who read audio descriptions are very robotic. Some people are very expressive. It's very different. It's a very different experience depending on who wrote the script, who's reading the script, who funded it, who edited it, who produced it, etc. You can end up with a very different effect. And as I said, depending on whether or not they actually add it correctly to the original media or not, because otherwise it can be too early, too late, it can interrupt what's going on, etc. So obviously some standardization would definitely help there, and it is thankfully way better than it used to be, but obviously we still have a bit of a way to go. Some interesting information here. So according to the American Foundation for the Blind, approximately 7.6 million Americans have visual impairments. And obviously that's in the US, but, it goes to show. Obviously that's about, I think, 5%, and it might be slightly less, of the population. But it is, a non-insignificant amount. For example, if a movie was to make, 500 million, it would then, if it had audio description and people who are visually impaired went to go watch that, because of that, it could make, tens of millions more, essentially, which is obviously a big deal. So, I mean, again, it goes to show it's not just for like one or two people, it is for millions, well, hundreds of millions of people. So a 2021 study from the National Federation of the Blind found that 70% of visually impaired viewers found that audio description is essential for understanding televised content. So essentially, if you took 100 people who can't see and you were like, hey, do you want to watch this show? Or you played them the show, and then 70 people out of those 100, if it didn't have audio description, probably wouldn't understand what was going on. And the thing is, the other 30 people still may not, because that is, 70 people saying that it was essential. It doesn't mean that 30% of people said that they don't need it at all, So even that really important. So again, that is a huge sort of percentage of people who use audio description. So there was also some research published in the Journal of Visual Impairment and Blindness revealed that 88% of people using audio description found their overall viewing experience significantly improved. So that goes back to what I was talking about earlier, that if you have audio description on your show or movie, I'm going to enjoy it more. So I'll probably watch it. I might watch it again. I might continue watching, the next season. I might recommend it to a friend, etc. So the BBC, which is a broadcasting network in the UK, found that 90% of audio description users expressed satisfaction with the service and noted that they would use it more if it was available on a wider range of content. So essentially, that just means that 90% of people said that they really enjoyed the audio description and that if it was available on more content, then they would use it. So it's not that, people wouldn't necessarily use it either, because clearly they would. So it's really important to kind of include audio description in your media when it is possible. There are also some really interesting things currently going on. For example, Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, Disney Plus, etc., are all expanding their audio description catalogs. And as of 2023, anyway, Netflix was supposedly offering over 1,300 titles with audio description. Now, that is nothing in comparison to the amount of shows that Netflix offers in general, but that is a huge amount of media, especially compared to even 5 or 10 years ago. And I said there's definitely still a ways to go, but that is a huge shift towards having audio description in every show, in every movie. Now, in a lot of countries, actually, there are now laws being enacted to kind of make audio description mandatory. For example, the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act in the US mandates that a certain percentage of programming must have audio description. And obviously, ideally, it should be 100%. But even having legislation like this coming into place really helps to kind of push companies to start to include it. And I mean, if they're including it in some of their programming, they then may decide to include it in more of their programming, especially if they get positive feedback and positive results from doing so. I mean, for me personally, I've already mentioned how important audio description is for even me and my wife, for us to actually enjoy and watch a show. It makes a huge difference, because otherwise I don't know how many shows we would actually watch together, and we might, but given that my wife would then have to describe everything that's going on, we may not watch as many shows together. And to be completely honest, I actually used to hate audio description. And that isn't putting it lightly. I think it's about 2 years ago now, maybe a little bit more. My wife was like, how about we try watch this movie with audio description? And I was like, no, I hate audio description. When I was a kid, I don't remember what it was, but I watched at least one thing, maybe a couple things with audio description. And it was, in my opinion, very annoying. As far as I remember, it kept interrupting the movie. It was not very good, etc., etc., etc. And I kind of had that bad experience with audio description. I said, I'm not going to use that again. That did not make the viewing experience better for me. My wife eventually convinced me to try it again. And ever since then, we've used it whenever it's available, essentially. And we will specifically watch things with audio description instead of things without it now. So, again, it goes to show how much of a difference it's made. And even I said, for me, who didn't used to like audio description, I now, when we're watching a show without it, I'm like, oh, I wish this had audio description. And it's, whatever. It's fine, I guess, that it doesn't, at least with some shows. But honestly, it's also not. Why doesn't it have audio description at this point? So, another thing is that it doesn't necessarily need to be used by people who are blind. And I kind of mentioned this earlier. My wife actually, before she even moved, we moved in together and we got married. She actually used audio description herself. So let's say she was watching a show, but she wanted to go wash the dishes. She would turn on audio description and she would go wash the dishes while still listening to her show. So, and just to clarify, she's not blind. She does wear glasses, but she can see perfectly fine with her glasses on. But she would actually use audio description um, to kind of let her still watch a show, even if she couldn't look at the screen. So, although it is basically meant for people who are visually impaired, it can actually be used by people who aren't in really interesting and helpful ways. So, again, another advantage. It's not even just for people who are visually impaired, even if you're busy doing something else. You can have audio description on, and it will, I mean, it won't provide any downsides. It just lets you watch a show that you otherwise couldn't watch. So, I hope this helped you understand how important audio description is. So, if you can, advocating for audio description is obviously great, whether it be just in your community, whether you actually contact, media companies. I've done that a few times now. If I see something, well, we find something on Disney Plus that doesn't have audio description, but we would like to watch it, we'll call Disney Plus and say, hey, you should really add audio description to this. And look, I don't know if they actually will, but if enough people, call them and say, or email them and do whatever and say, hey, this should really have audio description, somebody's probably going to notice. And it will show them that, oh, actually, us adding audio description isn't just kind of going unnoticed. People are actually requesting it and enjoying it. So, we should invest more time and money into doing that. So, the more people that do that, the better. Obviously, if you're able to get sort of user feedback on audio description, so for example, if I listen to something with audio description and the audio description track is way too quiet compared to the movie, I've contacted the so for example, it was Prime Video actually in this case, and I believe I don't even remember. I think it was the Hunger Games movie maybe, and I had actually never watched them before. So we watched them, but the audio description was really quiet. So I told Prime Video, I was like, okay, actually, your audio description is completely unusable. It is so quiet on this movie. You can't listen to the movie and hear the audio description because you have to have the movie so loud that it is unbearable. And they fixed it, but obviously they can only fix issues like that if you tell them. So, if you're using audio description and you think, oh, this could be better, oh, they actually kind of spoiled what was going on there, oh, it's way too quiet, it's way too loud, whatever, if you're able to contact those companies, they will, possibly fix it. And in my experience, they have. Now, another thing to consider here is the sort of future of audio description. And I was actually at World Sight Day on Wednesday. In the Technological University of Dublin, and somebody actually asked me about this specifically. And that's sort of how technological advancements might sort of affect things like audio description. So, obviously, if let's say you're watching a football game, right? You could have AI watching the game, generating a script and reading it all in real time, probably more accurately than a person could and faster than a person could. So having AI and machine learning being capable of sort of performing these things could mean that everything could have audio description. I could go onto Netflix and there would no longer be this manual audio description that's being created anymore. It would just be created by AI. So every single show, every single movie, everything that I want can have audio description, even if it's a game. If let's say I'm wearing a pair of smart glasses, the AI could audio describe my life essentially while I'm walking around. It could say, there is a person crossing the street ahead of you. There is a car driving down the street when I'm trying to cross, whatever. There is a cat on the path in front of you, and that way I know that I need to go say hello, whatever it might be. So again, like things like AI can really sort of enhance the life of somebody who can't see. Obviously, broader adoption across media would be fantastic. I said it being sort of expanded beyond traditional media to be included in games, virtual reality, or anything like that, really. Even sort of general experience. I said if you're on a tour, for example, it being available with audio description would be absolutely fantastic. Would be, it would really sort of enhance the experience. I'd be able to understand better what's happening on the tour. I'd be able to gain more information. I also wouldn't have to ask as many questions because sometimes, I don't want to say it can be embarrassing, but it feels like an inconvenience to have to keep asking people questions like, oh, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? What are they pointing at? What are they talking about? Can you tell me about it? What's it look like? Etc. You know, Sometimes you don't want to have to bother people with that. And I'm not saying you shouldn't, because you should. And you shouldn't feel bad about it. But, as a person who cares about other people, sometimes it's like, okay, everybody else is just trying to enjoy the tour. I don't want to bother them. It would be nice if there was just a way for me to know this without having to get somebody to tell me every single time. Obviously, if you have used audio description before, whether you're blind or not, please do let me know what you actually think of it. If you enjoy it, if you find it useful. Do you have any sort of suggestions even as to how audio description could be better? Even if you haven't used it before today and the only experience you've had with it is the clips that I've played, tell me, what do you think? Do you think it could be better? Do you think it's useful? Whatever it might be. Obviously, if you want to learn more, head to the Audio Description Project. I said they are fantastic. I'll have a link in the description to the example list that they have. They have a lot of examples, but if you don't want to do that, you can just go to Netflix or any streaming service right now, look up any popular movie, and it should have audio description, especially if it's a more modern movie. But I said things for sure, like the Harry Potter movies, Hunger Games, anything like that will probably have audio description. Friends definitely has it. So there are a lot of shows that if you're interested, you can go watch with audio description. So obviously, if you're interested in, maybe getting involved in audio description, I said there's a lot of companies out there. So, feel free to find one of those, whether it be AudioEyes or whatever it might be. Contact them if you want to get kind of involved in maybe creating scripts, reading audio descriptions, whatever it might be, or even if you just want kind of more information. As I mentioned earlier, if you can, advocating for audio description would be great. Even just doing a social media post about it, or contacting somebody if you work in the media industry, maybe mentioning it to somebody, whatever it might be next time you're kind of working on something, thinking, oh, okay, could this benefit from audio description? Even if you yourself are a YouTube creator, is there a way that you could kind of use audio description in your videos? So I said, no matter what it might be, even if it's just spreading the word, it doesn't matter. Anything makes a big difference because it has a huge impact on everybody who can't see. Well, pretty much anybody who uses audio description, I said, whether you can see or not. So it would honestly mean a lot to a lot of people if, you could kind of help communicate that to other people. Because I said a lot of the problem here is the lack of awareness here. So that's going to be it for this episode. If you have enjoyed, then make sure you come back next time. And as always, this has been the Envisiontech podcast. I've been your host, Paul Gagan, and I will see you all next week.